Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Eisman, and I'm here with one of my favorite people in this entire world, Mr. Andrew Perlman. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Do you want to hear crazy? I thought on my way here, I was thinking, that you and I have actually never met. Isn't that crazy?
It is truly wild. We have to change that. We really do.
How long have we been learning for? I think it's over a year.
I do think it's been about a year.
So Andrew and I started learning with the podcast fellowship, and Andrew just when we transitioned, just studying the Torah portion, and here we are. Andrew suggested we turn them into podcasts, and we are doing just that. So welcome everybody. Thank you, Andrew, for making us a success, and we're going to jump right in. Are you ready, Andrew?
I can't wait.
Today is the awesome holiday of Chanukah and the Torah portion of Miketz. Let's try to dig deep and uncover some incredible lessons from both the Torah portion and Chanukah. So let's jump right in. First of all, question number one, Andrew, that the miracle of Chanukah is, people know about the oil burning for 8 days. The oil was supposed to burn for 1 day and really burn for 8 days. But people might not know that the real miracle of Chanukah, the big miracle of Chanukah, was the victory of the ragtag bunch of rabbis, 13 rabbis or 13 yeshiva students fighting against the entire army. The army had outlawed Shabbat and Torah study. And that's, by the way, where the dreidel comes from. The dreidel, right? You know the famous dreidel? That was that they would be studying Torah, and the Greeks were outlawed Torah study. So they'd come in and they say, "What's going on?" They say, "Oh, we're just playing dreidel." That's where the idea of the dreidel comes from. So this oppression of outlawing Torah study and Shabbat and circumcision, they rebelled, and it was an incredible military victory. Why do we celebrate Chanukah with the minor miracle, although it's a cool miracle that the oil lasted for 8 days, but it's sort of minor compared to the massive military victory? Why don't we have like dancing at maybe with bow and arrows or marching with military fatigues? Why do we celebrate the oil and not the military victory? That's question number one. Question number two is, Mr. Andrew Perlman, the oil lasted for 8 days. It was only supposed to last for 1 day. And therefore, how many days of miracle are there?
7 days.
So that's, of course, right? It was supposed to last for 1 day, and it lasted for 8 days. So the miracle part is only 7 days. Why do we have Chanukah for 8 days? So I want to share with you an amazing story that I heard, and here's how it goes. There's a book called Incredible, and it's a story, the life of Rabbi Yossi Wallace, who's done amazing for Jewish education in the world. And he grew up as a secular Israeli kid in outskirts of Tel Aviv. And one day he's in the attic looking through his family's things, and he pulls out a picture, and he sees this old rabbi, and he goes over to his mom and says, "Who is this rabbi?" And his mom says, "That's actually your grandfather." He goes, I never met him. How come I never heard of him? He said, she told him he actually died in the Holocaust. So he says, what happened? So she tells him this incredible story. He was in the Holocaust for 4 years, and he obviously tremendously suffering in different camps. And it was right before liberation. And for 4 years, he was suffering, and the Nazis called all the Jews into the camp square and said, the war is over. The Russians are coming. As a parting gift to the Nazis, we're going to have this rabbi eat some pork today. And they pulled the rabbi in, and they gave him some pork, and they said, "Rabbi, as a parting gift, eat this pork for us." And the rabbi said, "I'm not eating the pork. I made it this far. I'm not eating the pork." And the Nazis took out a gun, and he said, "If you don't eat this pork, I'm going to kill you." And the rabbi said, "I'm not eating the pork." So the Nazis said, everyone looked down over there, and they saw, they saw tanks. They saw like smoke coming up from traffic for a couple on the horizon. It says in 3 or 4 hours, the Russians are going to be here to liberate the camp. And you're going to be free. You made it in 4 years. Eat this. You're 3 hours away from liberation. And the rabbi said, "I'm not eating it." And he took out a gun, and the Nazi killed your grandfather. That's how your grandfather died. So Yossi Wallace grew up and he was, let's say, 30, 35 years old. And one day he's at work and his wife calls him and says, honey, could you pick up dinner on your way home? He says, sure. And he's driving home and he pulls into their favorite restaurant and his kids text him and say, hey, could you get some ham sandwiches? He says, sure. And he's waiting online and it's hot and it's sunny and it's a long line. And somehow this story pops into his head. And he's like, one second. Either my grandfather is an idiot or I'm an idiot, because my grandfather gave up his life not to eat ham, and here I am standing in the hot sun in a long line to pay money to eat ham. So what's going on? So hold on to that story for a second, my friend, and I just want to tell you another story that I think will shed light and answer our first two questions, and also on this story as well. There were two scientists named James Watson and Francis Crick. They discovered the depth of DNA. And after they discovered DNA, they said the following statement: it is so incredible. It is so wondrous. It is so miraculous. It's so sophisticated. There is no way that this could have just happened. It's impossible that this sophisticated system just was a coincidence, that it just happened. It must have come from aliens on another planet. Now, how do you have two wise scientists come up with such an insane hypothesis? And the answer is Chanukah. The difference between the Greeks and the Jews was, is there more than meets the eye? Is it what you see is what you get, or is there something greater than ourselves? If it's what you see is what you get, so then I need to explain DNA in that philosophy. There's nowhere else to go. In that philosophy, I have to come up with something, but there's no explanation. So I come up with something that at least fits into that philosophy, like aliens, and therefore I don't have to answer the question, where did DNA come from? I just sort of dump it on another planet and we don't know. Well, that's the philosophy of the Greeks. What you see is what you get. The Jews are like, we don't care if we don't need to understand everything, right? We see COVID is here, right? There's a lot of things we don't understand. There's a lot of discoveries that we don't get, and we just accept. We are okay with not being able to understand the Creator. We can't measure the Creator. We can't wrap our brain what it means to be above time, to be above space, but we're okay with that. But as a rabbi, I've heard many times, I'm sure you've heard it many times, right? A friend goes to the Kosel, right? And the Western Wall, and I felt something. I felt connected. I felt spiritual. Or I was meditating, and I felt connected to something greater than myself. Or I went to the Holocaust, I went to Poland, and I felt a connection to something greater than myself. And imagine if you say to a friend, your friend says, really, what was that like? And I can't really explain it. And so what was it? Well, I can't really verbalize it. And, so I guess it must have been something you ate. In other words, I know that I experienced something, but I can't necessarily define it. And that's what spirituality is. Spirituality is the connection to something much greater than the physical. The reason why these scientists made such a crazy statement is because that is their philosophy. That's the Greek philosophy. The Greeks were so into beauty and art and literature and architecture, and they were so good at it. But it was art for art's sake. They didn't destroy the temple. They beautified the temple. But it's just like any other building. It's a beautiful building. It's art for art's sake. You should have big muscles and be fit. Why? Because you could have big muscles. Because big muscles are beautiful. The Jews said, no, big muscles are good in order to do good things with. Art is good if it reminds you to something, a bigger message. It reminds you to be kinder and better and more caring. It reminds you to call your grandma. It reminds you that life is short. It reminds you to seize the moment. It's not art for art's sake. often, I have students that are in actors or writers. So I'm like, well, what's your message? Right? You're a messenger. You want to be a messenger. If you're going to be a messenger, you have to have a message. What do you want to act about? What do you want to use your talent of writing or acting or directing? What message do you want to promote? And it's sad or funny or both that people don't think about that. I just want to be an actor. I want to be a writer. We have to develop a message and then use acting or writing to promote that message. But the Greeks were saying that no, this is fine, art for art's sake. Also, that's what they're into homosexuality, right? That's the difference. A heterosexual relationship is in or producing children, right? Without getting to the whole political thing, the whole, but homosexual sex is just for sex sake. So that was a disagreement with the Greeks and the Jews. And the reason why we celebrate the oil and not the war is because the war can be explained in a Greek way, right? Just unfortunately, in the Israeli victories, military victories, the hand of God was so incredibly obvious. And yet still people said it was the Israeli military bravery, wisdom, cunning. And it's true, they're great. They're wise and talented, but they could not have done it without the hand of God. The reason why we celebrate the oil is that we shouldn't fall into say, oh, wow, these guys were really great warriors. Oil, you can't explain oil burning for 8 days. The miracle is of the oil because oil can't be explained in a Greek way. The miracle of the oil can only be explained in a Jewish way. That's why the miracle of Chanukah is the oil. And that's why it's 8 days instead of 7 days. Because from the fact that the oil burned for 7 days, 7 extra days, we're reminded that the 8th day is also a miracle. The first day is also a miracle. It's also the hand of God. That everything is the hand of God. And that is a message of Chanukah. The victory of Chanukah is that we are highlighting and celebrating that which is above the physical. We're lighting that candle on top of what's the difference between two candles, right? You look at two candles, one is lit, one is not lit. They don't look very different, but one is serving its purpose and one is just a candle. When I light that menorah, I'm spiritualizing the candle. We have to see each other, see the world for who we really are, which is a piece of the infinite. We're all united by one connecting. All of humanity is one, right? The world is so into trying to find the secret to world peace. This Hanukkah is a secret to world peace, that we're all united, one united piece of the infinite. 7.8 billion people are all one united piece of the infinite. And the Greeks tried so hard to knock that out of the Jews, right? They outlawed Shabbat. Why? What does Shabbat do? Shabbat takes the 6 days of creation and ties it all together and says, puts a candle on the week, right? Circumcision is the same thing. Circumcision takes the very intense hedonistic physical drive, and we sort of spiritualize and say it's going to be a little bit curved. We're sort of directing it towards God, right? Studying Torah, getting married, all these things they forced the brides, the Jewish brides, to live with a Greek general before they were with their husband. Before they got married and lived with the Greek husband, they had to go be with the Greek general. Why? Because again, what's the idea of marriage? The idea of the marriage is the male is the kuchabrichu, the godliness of the sort of the omnipresent of God, and the woman symbolizes the Shekhinah, the manifestation of God in this world. In other words, the woman brings the potential into reality, right? The man provides a potential, the woman brings it into the world, right? So that's the kuchabrichu and the Shekhinah, right? So they came between that. They came between the unification of God into the physical world. The husband is sort of representing of kuchabrichu. The Shekhinah is the manifestation in this world, and the Greek wanted to come in between that doesn't exist. What you see is what you get. There is nothing higher. And that is the message of Chanukah, my friend. So what does that have to do with the portion of Miketz? So just very, very quickly, the portion of Miketz is the story of Joseph, or a continuation. We started a little bit last week, the story of Joseph. So what happened? Joseph was sold by his brothers to Egypt, and in Egypt he was sold he was sold to Potiphar, and his wife accused Joseph of rape, and Joseph was thrown into prison, and then he interprets dreams in prison, and he gets taken out of prison, and he gets brought before Pharaoh, and he interprets Pharaoh's dream, and Pharaoh loves his interpretation, and Pharaoh makes him the viceroy of Egypt, the second highest commander in Egypt. That is the story of Joseph. So here is a question for us to think about. What was the biggest challenge in the life of Joseph? Hearing the whole story, Mr. Andrew Perlman, what do you think was the biggest challenge for Joseph?
I want to say being in prison, but I feel like that's not the correct answer.
Well, again, it's a subjective answer. I want to share listen, you're totally, you have your right to your opinion. And, I don't know if Rabbi Victor Miller says an amazing idea. He says that the biggest challenge, I guess the biggest spiritual challenge for Joseph was becoming viceroy of Egypt. Why? Because when you're in Egypt, when you're in prison, okay, you're holding on to your religion. You have nothing else to really hold on to, right? You're a slave. You're being sold into Egypt. Right? When you become the second in command in Egypt, it's so tempting to be sucked into a concept of this same concept. What you see is what you get, right? This is the prevailing culture around you, and the glitz and the glamour. Egypt was the modern and hip and cool, successful place. Everybody was coming to Egypt to get food, and Joseph is the viceroy of Egypt. It was perhaps very tempting for Joseph to say, "Okay, so I'm part of some tribe, and in Israel." And sort of abandon it. But no, the Torah says, "Who Joseph?" He was the same Joseph, the same person. And as a matter of fact, when his brothers came down to Egypt, he told them, he said, tell Pharaoh that you are your shepherds, because you shouldn't be offered, because Joseph's brothers would naturally be offered minister positions and leadership positions in the government, right? Joseph said, no, don't tell them that you're talented in that way. Tell them you're just shepherds. All we are is shepherds. Why? Because he was afraid that the brothers would get sucked into the glitz and the glamour. And therefore he wanted them to live in Goshen and to sort of be away from everyone and not be sucked into it. The biggest challenge for Joseph was to not get sucked into it. Why? Because it's so convincing. What you see is what you get. What do you mean? There is no God. You see God? Show me God. Where? Everywhere. Yeah, but you can't measure it, right? How do you explain it? So the spirituality is the thing that we can't specifically measure. And just to end, Joseph says to Pharaoh, my friend Andrew, Joseph says to Pharaoh, appoint for yourself somebody very wise and understanding. In order to remind you, the story was that Pharaoh had a dream, and Joseph interpreted the dreams to say that there's going to be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And Joseph interprets them and he says, what you should do is appoint for yourself somebody very wise and understanding to be able to save the food for the 7 years of plenty, in order that they should have enough food during the 7 years of famine. Now, the question is, why do the person have to be so wise and understanding? It's not such a complicated idea. They have to be a good organizer, maybe a good authoritarian. They have to be, good with people. But why does it have to be such wisdom that to save up during the years of plenty for the years of famine? And the idea is that we're living in this world, and it's very tempting during years of plenty, during times of plenty, to say, okay, there's a couple extra stalks of wheat, whatever, there's plenty, or okay, be a little, take a little extra, to be incredibly cognizant of the oncoming famine. And that is a message for us as well. We live in this world, and there are so many opportunities to recognize the Creator in this world. There's so many opportunities. If we open our eyes and you just see another person, we could look at the other person as just, oh, there's a mailman, or there's a lawyer, there's a doctor, there's a gas station guy. Or you could say, there is God. There's a piece of the infinite. I could look at a tree and the grass and the trees, and I could see God. But you have to be wise and discerning. Why? Because we're not going to live forever. And once we are not physically here, we will never die. Our bodies die, but we will never die. And then we will be a part of the infinite. And therefore, it's no challenge to see the infinite because we're part of the infinite. And it's the most obvious thing in the world. While we're in this world, we have the opportunity to see the infinite, even through the darkness, through the surrounding skepticism. We're able to find. There's a beautiful story that's quoted by many different people. That there was a general who one of the generals won a mighty war, and the king was so grateful and so taken. He said, I'm going to give you an hour in my treasury. You could take anything you want. And then a couple of weeks later, before the time comes, the king feels a little bit nervous that this guy is going to completely clean him out. So he does some research and he finds out that this guy is a lover of music, and the king wants to keep his word. So he opens the door on the day of the event, and he opens the door, and the guy walks into the treasury about to grab treasures, and he hears this incredible orchestra. And he said, I have a whole hour. Let me first enjoy this beautiful music. And he goes, now, to 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And he's listening to this incredible music. And it's like, I should really start taking jewels. But and then at the last minute, a couple minutes left, he grabs a couple of jewels, and then time's up. So we're in this world for a very short time, Mr. Andrew Perlman. And we need to take every moment to grab opportunities to light the menorah. Right? Light the menorah throughout the world. You see a tree, light a menorah on it. Right? What do I mean by that? See the spirituality in it. You see another person, light a menorah on their head. Right? What does that mean? Like, see the spirituality in it. That's the holiday of Chanukah. The message that we are all a piece of the infinite.